Hi everyone. So today we're going to talk about the short story that you just read, The Fun They Had. So Isaac Asimov is writing this story in the 1950s, and he's trying to guess what technology will look like in the future and how that might adjust and change the way that people learn and the type of education that they receive. Now, really interestingly, he is speculating or guessing that kids will learn at home using some kind of assistive technology, whether it's a robot or a computer, is kind of unclear in his description, but some sort of technology is going to assist them to learn at home in about 200 years from when he's writing. But in reality, we can see that we're using that technology right now. You're learning at home, and it's only been about 70 years since he wrote that story. So some things here he really kind of touches on that are really appropriate and true, and other things are a little off based on some guesswork that he's putting into place. Now remember, in Isaac Asimov's time, when he's writing in the 1950s, some computers take up whole rooms. So it's not the same kind of technology that we have right now, and he was really ahead of his time in thinking that maybe this was even possible. There were certainly people in 1950 who didn't even believe it would be possible for kids to learn by machine at home without someone, a physical person, teaching them right there in the moment. So, this is before the internet, this is before laptops and cell phones. So remember that he's really kind of ahead of his time in terms of his thinking. Now, when we dig into our story, we see that the main character is Margie, and Margie is 11 years old. She does have a friend named Tommy that we see at the beginning of the story, and Tommy is 13. And remember, he's the one that brings the book over to show her about schools of the past. Now, the future is our setting, and that is a future even further than right now. It's in 2155, so many years into the future. And we can start to think, as the story is set up, that this could be a source of conflict, right? The way that schools are in the future and the fact that they're bringing up schools of the past kind of sets us up to think that there's a bit of a conflict here. Certainly, it's clear as we dig into that idea of conflict that Margie hates school. She does not like learning the way that she is. And that makes us kind of think about types of conflict. So if I were going to classify the type of conflict, I'd have to think about this. Is this a person versus society conflict? Because really, society has set up this system of education. But she really doesn't seem to like learning by machine, whether that's a computer or a robot. So that also is kind of a person versus technology conflict. So really, I think, it doesn't have to be just one. We could look at aspects of both in this story, and I think both might be valid in this case. When we look at the mood of the story, it seems sad. And really, we are meant to feel sympathy for Margie. We're meant to be on her side and root for her as a character. She appears in the story as annoyed, frustrated, and irritated, certainly with the system of education and the way that things are playing out for her in school. At the end of the story, if we go to the resolution, we can see Margie thinking back to the stories that she's talking about with Tommy and thinking about what the advantages were of schools in the past. And she thinks about all the fun that groups of kids would have had at school in the old days. And because we are seeing the story with Margie, right? We're rooting for her. The reader with Margie realizes by the end of the story that, maybe this kind of education where kids gather together and there's more of a collaborative atmosphere, maybe that type of school would have been better for her than the type of school that she's experiencing. Now, when we look at that, I just said we're kind of viewing the story as rooting for Margie. Well, the author makes some very specific choices to help us to do that. And that has to do with point of view. So the story is not told from Margie's point of view, but we are focused in on her. Tommy is sort of a side character. Although he's there, he's not the focus. Margie's the focus. And so we could say that this story's point of view is third person, so that the person who's telling the story is a third-person narrator, but it's limited. It's limited omniscient. Omniscient, remember, is that Latin word meaning all-knowing. So our narrator is focused in. They don't know everything in the story. They know a limited amount based on Margie's perspective, right? Margie's not telling the story. This isn't a first-person narrator. But we also can't see inside the heads of the other characters, like Tommy or Margie's mother or the county official that comes to calibrate the machine. So we know that this is a limited perspective and we're limited to Margie, but that our narrator is outside of her character. So that's third person, limited, omniscient point of view. Now, if we think about the system that Margie and Tommy are using for their education, it seems clear that the kids have some kind of a mechanical teacher, which is either a robot or a computer, that is selecting lessons and quizzes and tests for them based on their abilities. And so because the school lessons are tailored or matched to each individual student, they're all individualized, all of the students have to learn by themselves because they're all doing different things based on what they're able to do. And because of that, kids have now been educated at home. So it's a big change from the schools of the past. So why would Margie think that they're more fun? Well, I think that she, first of all, liked the idea of a human teacher. She thought that was really strange and interesting. And she also thought it was interesting that the kids could learn the same things at the same time. And they talk about the lessons and learn from each other. And we certainly see her doing that with Tommy at the beginning of the story. So she felt that schools of the old days, by the end of the story, would help her to learn better than her robot teacher. And if we think about that title, The Fun They Had, that is so significant. Think back to our memoir unit where we talked about the significance of titles and how they can be very important at cluing us into the theme of a story or a poem. And this title really emphasizes the theme here. So many kids learn by interacting, by talking and discussing things with other people. Students don't all learn the same way, and the exchange of ideas can be fun. So what's interesting here is that although the lessons are tailored to the students, the way that they're getting the information is not. They're all learning by robot. They're not necessarily learning by doing or through different kinds of activities that are available maybe in a regular classroom, like discussion or some kind of product at the end, a creative assignment. So by the end of the story, Margie realizes that she learned best when she was discussing things with others. Her discussion about schools of the past with Tommy at the beginning of the story helped her to understand that she would benefit from learning in a classroom with other kids. And so we see then that the main theme is that, in the future, schools and education are going to become increasingly computerized, and that we are going to be estranged or distanced from social interactions. And so really here, you can see the author's purpose come out. There is a sense of warning almost that there are dangers in computerized homeschooling because they keep kids from spending time making those personal interactions, not just between each other, but also between a student and a teacher. And that helps them to develop social skills. And without that opportunity, it's really hard for kids sometimes to learn new information. And even if the lessons are tailored just to your ability, they might not be the right fit because you're not doing the kinds of activities that help you to learn best. So I hope that by watching this video, you have a better understanding of our story. If you have any questions, of course, you can always pop into my office hours or shoot me an email, and I'm happy to help in any way that I can.